my question about left and right and how the same organizing principles could apply to someone who was a cultural conservative or someone who was a Republican business-friendly operator as would apply to helping undocumented people perhaps have a decent provision and,
I think so because we do a workshop on culture. And we talk about a relational culture or civic culture over against a dominant culture. And one of the tenets of the dominant culture is the ideology of the market, privatization. Okay, no government. We want to make government so small we're going to drown it in the bathtub. Well, we did that, and we get flooding. We get Katrina. We get the flooding in the grid debacle in Texas. Okay. That's the result of no government. Okay, so one of the things I've learned over time is that markets work best when they're embedded in a strong civic culture, and when they have a local, strong, capable, and effective and responsive local government to be able to do things that people like Frank Knight say government's supposed to do. Make sure that we all have the rule of law, the rules of the game. Okay, and it's just so that we can sustain market activity over against the ideology, of the market, which is really about power and domination and control.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm being responsive or not. If I'm not, you can.
No. But this is all good. This is all good because I had on the show recently Richard Wolff, the Marxist economist, and we debated the relative merits of capitalism and socialism. I took capitalism. He took socialism, as is predictable.
And you both are wrong. And Frank Knight said to be talking about enterprise, not capitalism.
Let me say my piece here.
I apologize.
I'm not going to put rank on you because I actually did finish my PhD in economics. You never did finish yours, did you?
No, I never did. I'm just got a measly bachelor's degree.
Because there were many more valuable things for you to do. I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing you, Ernie. But I'm going to say this. Of course, the framework of markets, transactions, property, trade, contract requires a framework, an institutional framework of law. Of course, disputes have to be settled. Courts have to adjudicate and so forth and so on. One relies upon the police for security of property and person, for example, and one could carry on from there. So the market, quote unquote, the market isn't some kind of freestanding entity that's just some kind of idealized, perfect gas where all the laws of physics work out exactly right. On the other hand, enterprise, prices, supply and demand, Friedrich von Hayek, efficiency. Okay, when somebody tells me they don't like the price of X, whatever X is, baby formula or a rental apartment, because their favorite group is disadvantaged by that price, I'm holding my wallet. I mean, I'm on the watch. I'm on the lookout because I think at the end of the day, resource allocation will be most effectively realized if we let supply and demand determine prices and we accommodate ourselves to the reality of those messages, et cetera. I could go on. I'm not going to preach. I think the idea of a corporation, a legal entity that allows for a nexus of contracts internalized to a firm as opposed to it being engaged in by freestanding, separate private entities that are trading over markets with each other is an interesting set of problems. But I don't think corporations embody evil. I think the ideology that runs around talking about big corporations running the world but has no comment about big unions running the world is again something that I want to hold my wallet when I hear it being bandied about. When I talk about finance, as if pulling together the cumulative savings and investments of billions of people on behalf of major undertakings that have to be underwritten at a large scale 30-year investments when you're going to actually build a petrochemical plant or something of that kind. As though finance were simply a bunch of guys in offices stealing. This is the kind of stuff that comes out of the mouth of the Richard Wolffs of the world. Versus understanding that the modern economy rests upon a foundation in which people have to engage in these kinds of transactions. Is there superfluous, speculative, and kind of unproductive financial going? Of course, but you want to have insurance when you're taking a risk, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
So somebody's got to be able to write that insurance contract and lay off those risks and diversify and balance and whatnot. This is, again, I don't want to patronize you. I don't want to lecture. I am lecturing. I know that I'm lecturing. The conflict between people who, like me, embrace the market as a basic framework for thinking about the economy, and those who, like Richard Wolff, talk about using the power of government to move resources this way and that on behalf of their idea of what constitutes justice, is the fundamental conflict of our time. Okay? And, talking about Frank Knight doesn't resolve the conflict.
Well, no. And I'm not saying it does, and I'm not saying the conflict is easily resolvable. I've always been impressed by a book written by Arthur Oakland, Efficiency and Equality, The Great Trade-Off.
I know it. I cite that in my thesis, as a matter of fact, Ernie. Not, again, to pull rank, but...
All right. We can pull rank on it. But in that book, he has a phrase which I think is very useful for me anyway. The market has its place, but the market has to be kept in its place, not just by regulation, but also by society, by culture, by norms, okay? And the difficulty is we have lost sight of the role of non-economic factors in making sure that an enterprise culture is sustained. Daniel Bell's wonderful book, which I'm sure you cite also in your thesis, The Cultural Contradictions of Capitalism. Okay.
No, I know the book. I did not cite No, I cited Oken on the leaky bucket thing. He has this metaphor in that book that you just mentioned, Equality, Efficiency, The Big Trade-Off. He has this metaphor in there about the leaky bucket, because if you want to use government to redistribute, you carry the water from a well with a lot of water to a well with very little. The bucket has a little hole in it, and you don't get all the water over there. Same way with the tax system. When you try to redistribute income to take care of the poor, you lose a little something along the way. And that's just...
Ann Richards used to, as governor, used to say that you have to always account for a 10% cheat factor.
I prefer to think about incentives and about the fact that the marginal costs and benefits are not being equated when there's a wedge in there that's called the tax rate, so that the guy who pays and the guy who receives don't get the same thing. The government gets that wedge.
But see, look, one of the best part of a book written by John Kenneth Galbraith called American Capitalism was a metaphor. He said that according to the laws of thermodynamics, the bumblebee can't fly. Okay. And his point was that according to the theory of competitive pure competition, okay, the American system of enterprise doesn't work. When in fact we have when we want to show people then an example of what American capitalism is all about, we take them to see General Motors or IBM or whatever, these companies that unfortunately are no longer what they were. But the point being is that there is this disposition in an enterprise culture for power, for organizations to try to amass as much power as they can, and by so doing engage in what you call, as economists call, rent-seeking activity. Okay, and that's what people are going to do. It's not that they're evil; that's what they do. Okay, that's what John D. Rockefeller called the American Rose. Okay, that too much competition is wasteful. Okay. And so he did everything he could to get rid of, you got to prune the American rose, okay, to make it work. The challenge is, the difficulty is because we buy into the model, the ideology of perfect and competitive system, we don't recognize that this rent-seeking activity is part of the norm. And so and the problem is not that they engage in rent-seeking activity, is that they're not willing to share the rents. That's what labor unions are also about, okay? They're also about sharing the rents so that we recognize that there's going to be this rent-seeking activity, which again gouges the consumer a bit. But in order for there to be producers, And the question is, for me, do we just want to be consumers, or do we also want to be agents? Do we want to be producers?